Here we have Kyle from Indiana, who is talking to us about weapons of mass destruction not being in Iraq. What a specific thing to talk to us about here. Kyle, you're on the air on Truth Wanted. What's going on?
Good evening, Calvin, Dan. Hey, what I was calling about, that was an example.
Okay.
Why would a rational person be inclined to believe anything that our government tells us?
Okay.
There are several examples of lies in the various activity that our government's been involved in over the last 50 to 100 years, and they tell these lies and they get caught, but people still tend to believe the lies. Why?
Yeah.
Are we just sheep to the government?
Okay. Yeah. This is a great place to start. I think when we use the term government, and I'll start with I'll give my answer real quick, and I want to let Calvin give his answer too, Kyle, if that's okay, and then we'll let you hear your thoughts after that. But I would say, well, do world governments lie to their citizenry? Absolutely. Happens all the time. 100%. Definitely. It does happen. The government, though, as a term is very broad, right? It actually describes millions of different people around the world serving different functions in different areas, right? So when we talk about the government lying, I'm assuming, of course, you're talking specifically the American government, probably the federal government, right? And even then, that makes up hundreds of thousands of workers, right? So we're talking about lying here. I think it's better to talk about specifics. I think the State Department's a great way to start, right? Because the State Department informs us what's our position in the world. What's our position in reference to other global powers, right? Does the State Department lie to us when it comes to like weapons of mass destruction, for example? Sure. Yeah. I think you can point to evidence of that. I think you can point to other departments in the government that also lie to us. So how can we ever trust them? Well, the problem is they're also sometimes correct. That's the thing. They don't lie all the time. They lie sometimes, but not all the time. So I think as a blanket for me to say never trust what they say, I don't think that's good reasoning either, right? Because I think that there are times where they're telling correct things. So then it comes down to, well, how do we know what's true and what's not? And that's when it gets really difficult. It's going to be context dependent. I don't know. We'd have to talk about specific examples from specific people in specific departments at specific times, right? That's really all we can do. And at the end of the day, I'm never going to 100% sure no. I don't think I can have that complete knowledge of something. It's it's up to the citizenry of any political body to decide on their own whether or not they want to trust what their government is telling them to be true or not true about something. So I'm not going to say blanketly, yes, they're always telling the truth, or yes, they're always lying. I think it has to be broken down a little bit more. But there's my take on it. Calvin, what do you think about this question?
Yeah, I mean, kind of piggybacking off of what Dan said is that I think a lot of it comes down to like compartmentalization, so like not everyone who works at NASA is working on the moon landings, right? So like I have friends who work at NASA, but they have a desk job. So it's like, what reason would they have to lie on behalf of NASA? How would they know these things are even happening? I guess you could say to have that many people, I guess, construct a lie and hold it for that long about something would be it'd be damn near impossible, for being honest. Like for example, you look at like the moon landings or like flat Earth or something. Not everybody who works at NASA or is a archaeologist or whatever is working on the moon or anything. So it's like, why would it comes down to compartmentalization. So it's like, just again, like Dan said, just because one or a couple people, or even we could even say even a couple hundred or maybe even 1,000 or so people are lying about something in government, quote unquote, doesn't mean that everybody is lying and that they, again, don't tell the truth sometime.
Yeah. I mean, like Pat Tillman, for example, those of you who remember, Pat Tillman, of course, was an American football player that people venerated because he went and joined the military after the September 11th attacks. And the Army first reported that he died under enemy fire. It was later revealed that he died because another American soldier shot him on accident. right? How did we get that information? Sometimes that comes through tribunals that happen. MK Ultra is another great example of this, right? Where we have reporting that's done later, where facts do come out later. So the whole, keeping things secret for a long period of time, sometimes it does happen over a long period of time when we find out about stuff. Carl Sagan was another example of this. We just found out like not that long ago that he helped make a plan for the government to nuke the moon. Okay, like that's real. That's 100% a thing. So like, yeah, absolutely, things happen, and there's secrets and all kinds of stuff. So it's hard to tell, to be honest with you. I can't tell you, yeah, this is when you should, this is when you shouldn't. It's just going to be context dependent. It's too big of a question, but there are some things we can point to, right? One thing being other governments' verification of something, right? So like, if we're talking about a health situation, this is how we knew that. Like, for example, maybe during the COVID situation, where some countries weren't giving as accurate numbers, because we found some people's reports weren't matching with other people's reports. So there was some stuff going on there, right? So cross-referencing always helps. Again, journalism, right, is also great when folks are doing that firsthand investigative work into things. But yeah, for the average person, it's a lot to do, and we can't always know everything. So anyway, I'm cheating because I'm giving an extra answer after I said I want to hear your take after Calvin. But now I'm passing it over to you, Kyle. We just both spoke a lot there. What do you think?
That's all great stuff. I am talking about the U.S. government in particular. As an American, I tend to think we're better than the rest of the world. Maybe that's just in my own head, but I would think that because it's a government of the people, by the people, it is sort of representing me. And quite frankly, I don't like the lies. The lies.
Hey, well, which lies in particular? What do you think they're specifically lying about? Maybe we can start with that.
Right. Well, we can start with weapons of mass destruction.
Yeah. Okay.
We had our president, our vice president, all of the media telling us those weapons of mass destruction. Yet there were naysayers there saying, no, there's not, no, there's not. And those naysayers were just driven down as liars and, cowards. And it's really scary when I hear a big news statement out of the government. I immediately become skeptical. And I'm sorry, I can't help it. I just do. And I just don't understand why everybody doesn't do that. There are other examples of our CIA with MK Ultra and the Muskegee experiment. Do you gentlemen know what I'm talking about?
Yes. Yep. Okay. We've talked about both of those on this show before.
These are huge. Yes, these are huge lies. It's not just small little white lies. So there are powers that get into every government that are corrupt, and I think it's stuff that everybody needs to look at. The only advice that I would give anybody is when they hear a very tall story out of our intelligence agencies or any of the FBI, CIA, any of them, they should look at it with a critical eye, because to make a mistake on those kinds of subjects, people die.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with that. So, I think it's okay to be skeptical about things, news stories, and things that government agencies and representatives say. I think it's totally okay to be skeptical about those things, and you're able to, look up, go to Google it, man. You can look up whether those things are actually true or not. You can look up independent resources. You can look up independent accounts, contractors, etc. You can look up. You can verify these things, whether they're happening. So I think that's the big reason why these people who are saying that there aren't weapons of mass destruction are looked at as being crazy or, being shunned, et cetera, is because there's plenty of evidence and reason to corroborate that there are weapons of mass destruction in these types of places. And, to say that there's not, even though the evidence can be right there in front of them and, accessible to everybody, it sounds silly.
Yeah. Well, so and the weapons of mass destruction is a very interesting case, because you can make the argument, I think, that it goes kind of both ways with that one. There are some that say that, go ahead, Kyle. Sorry.
Can I clarify something? Yeah, I want to specify when I say weapons of mass destruction, I'm talking about the motivation for us to go into Iraq.
Right. Into Iraq.
Gosh, I'm sorry, my memory fails me on exactly when it was. Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction. Come to find out, he didn't.
Yes.
He
Yes.
didn't have
George
it.
Bush
And we
famously
went
gave a
and invaded
speech.
and killed millions of people. Yes.
Right. And what was found later, and so I'm going off of my own memory here, okay, so bear with me. But what was interesting about that specific case is that there was a question of, was this actually a White House sort of spin on a situation to justify an act of war to Congress, or was this actual misreporting by the intelligence community? In other words, was it actually just a bad job? Was it not really a lie? It was just a job not well done. And there's debate both ways, actually, as to how that's turned out. There's definitely intelligence that was not given to Bush at the time, from what I remember about the story, right? And the idea was, there were some cherry-picked accounts about what was happening in Iraq. So there was definitely some political, yandering there. But as far as were the people who are testifying to there being accounts there, were they being honest? Well, being honest doesn't always mean being true, right? Just because you think that something is true doesn't mean that it actually is true. So I think there were accounts, and I might be absolutely wrong about this. Again, I'm going off of memory, but I believe there are people who say, yes, we thought that this was true at the time, and it really wasn't. But again, this is a very hot topic of debate that I am not the biggest expert on. Regardless, though, Kyle, you are right. At the end of the day, there were not, right? It was not a true thing. And a lot of people believe it was a true thing, and it justified a tragedy, an international tragedy. So yeah, I share in your belief in wanting to be skeptical of any kind of authoritative body to give that gives you this reassurance, gives you credence, that says, hey, you should listen to me to what I say. I just have to take things one step at a time, though, because I don't think blind skepticism is any better than blind believing either, right? Because then you can't know what's true and what's not true. And again, at the end of the day, I'm not sure that we can always know for absolute sure. But you bring up an interesting case, so I commend you for that.
Thank you. The last thing I want to finish with, and then I'll let you guys go because you got other callers, I'm sure. The consequences of, I'm sorry, I lost my thought. I'm going to let you guys go on that.
That's
Thanks
okay.
for taking my call.
All right.
That's okay. No, great call, Kyle. Thank you for bringing that up. Thanks. Yeah. I never want to give the impression that, you should absolutely believe everything a government tells you or whatever. I think you see that sometimes in our community where it's just kind of like, oh, these are scientists that are saying this thing, or these are X saying this thing. And it's like, is it actually scientists saying this thing? Or is this a sort of astroturfed organization that claims to represent the opinions of scientists that are saying this thing, right? Is this something else, a source that's not as reputable as you might think that's saying this thing? These medical organizations that claim to be the American Freedom Clinic or whatever that says, hey, we shouldn't, give this thing to trans people or something. And it's like, oh, this is just like conservative think tank or something, right? There's definitely you should be able to question your own sources there. But yeah, go ahead, Calvin.
Yeah, it starts to slip into the same type of ideology that religious people have of well, my pastor says so, why would my pastor lie to me? How is my pastor wrong? It slips into that same type of ideology, as some of the people in the atheist community can say is I believe this because this guy who has a PhD said it. But I'm sorry, those couple letters after your name doesn't make you more believable in my opinion. Yeah. It's the evidence behind that.
Yes, 100%. How many PhDs out there absolutely crank out terrible books about wacky stuff, right? Yes. It happens all the time, but yeah, I mean, that's why we try to rely on consensus, but even then consensus doesn't always mean truth either. And that's the problem. I think it's this constant search of trying to figure out what's real and what's not real, that as the average person is just never going to be able to do when it comes to all truth claims, right? I can't go and verify every single study that's ever been done with every medicine and every environment. It's just not possible. So what do we do? Well, I don't know. For me, Calvin, and I would love to hear your take, is for me, I just have to rely on the principles that I've been given and the tools that I've been given to make the best decision possible. I have to see the track record of the authorities that I've listened to and have taken opinions from, and check that with you know, what other people say, and that's really all I can do. I don't know. That's how I would say. What would you
Yeah.
say?
I mean, my position's pretty similar. It's, you know, independent resources and corroboration. You know, more than one guy, one team of people saying this. You know, it's got to be scientific studies to back it up. You know, a lot of it does come down to trust, you could say.
Yeah.
You know, it's yeah. I mean, a lot of it does come down to just, you know, hopefully they are telling the truth, and hopefully if they're not, that comes to light sometime soon.
Yeah, I mean, like, you know, if there is some sort of upending scientific breakthrough, right? Let's say that in the field of quantum mechanics or quantum physics, rather, somebody's made this crazy new thing, this new equation that really solves it all. I'm not going to be the guy that verifies that. Right.
Exactly.
It's not going to be me. It's going to be other people who've worked in that field their entire lives who are going to say, okay, yeah, this is actually legit. Right. So
Exactly.
that's what I have to do. That's the only thing I can do, because I don't have time to study that and then study medicine and then study climate change and then study you know, American military foreign policy, right? Like it's just not feasible for the average person. So yeah, there are authoritative bodies that I do rely my information on, and that can be problematic potentially, but there's nothing I can do. I don't
Yeah.
know unless somebody has something better.
And I 100% agree. Yeah.